Hello there! My name is Laura and I'm an artist who likes to do coloring, painting, and drawing tutorials. In this lesson today we'll be exploring how to draw crystals in watercolor. Before we get started, I'd just like to run through the supplies that we'll be using for this particular exercise. First, I'll start out by talking about brushes. I've pulled a selection of brushes here which I thought I may use. I have here a large oval mop brush, which I probably won't use, but just in case I need a nice wash brush. I also have a smaller flat wash brush. This is a 1/2 inch. And then I have a selection of rounds. Rounds are my favorite type of brush, especially the medium-sized rounds like these two here. But I also have some smaller detail brushes in case we need them as well. I'll also be using the Staedtler products for sketching. I have here the Staedtler Mars Lumograph in 4H. This is a very light value, so the sketch won't show up too much after the painting is complete. I'll also be using an eraser and a sharpener as needed. As far as paint goes, I'm using the Kuretake Gansai Tambi watercolor set. Here's the cover in case you're not familiar. And this set is really beautiful. It has really nice saturated colors, but you can use any watercolor that you have available to you. I'll be using a little plastic reused plate that I've been using as a palette. And same with my water cups. I use 2 cups of water, one for clean and one for dirty water. I'll also be using a ruler to draw as needed. And for the paper, you can use any watercolor paper that you have available if this is an exercise for you like it is for me. I'm not using expensive paper. I'm using the Canson XL watercolor paper. The only requirement I have for my watercolor paper when I'm doing these studies is just that it's 140 pound. But as far as the brand goes, you don't have to break the bank if you're just practicing and having fun. Also, for some special effects at the end, you'll most likely see me use this Winsor & Newton Designer's Gouache in permanent white, and also this Daniel Smith Extra Fine Watercolor in Pearlescent Shimmer. The last thing that I'll be using for a special effect is actually just a regular old shaker of salt. Alright, let's get started. So first I'm going to start out by sketching, and for this particular project I want to do a grid. So I'm going to use my ruler and mark out, I'll do 6 different crystals. I'm going to move this out of the way a little just while we're sketching. So the grid that I'm going to do, let me just mark off my workspace. I don't want him to go any higher than here, so I'm just going to create a point. And now for some loose sketching. So the trick with crystals is to use straight lines. Let's see, actually. And to use geometric shapes. I like using triangles and other more complex shapes. Let's see here. And then for the bottom of this one, I'll create a more natural, uncut edge. Let's make sure I'm not going past my guide. All right. I think that looks okay. I hope you can see it all right. Next, I'll be going into the other one. I want these two on the sides to be smaller, a little shorter maybe. So the tall one and then two short ones on the sides. So I'm going to create a point about here. And maybe we'll make them not exactly the same height. Maybe this guy's a little taller. Maybe around here. Let's see, and we'll make him kind of off center too. Okay. So I'm going to just keep sketching and I'll speed up the rest of this just so you can see my process. I'm going to go through and complete the rest of these in the same manner that I've done with this one crystal. All right, I'll meet you in a bit. Okay, so now that I've got my basic ideas down, I'm going to actually lighten them up. So I want you to take a good look now because you might have a hard time seeing them later. The reason why I'm going to lighten them up is because I don't want the pencil to show through the watercolor that much. So right now the lines are still fairly dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lighten them up, but not get rid of them completely. So I'll do one and then I'll speed it up. So for this, I'm just using light pressure on the paper, just going over the pencil. Not pressing hard. So here's an example of what it will look like when it's done. Hope you can see that. So now I'm going to do the rest. Man, I wish I were that fast in real life. Okay, so now you can see I've still got some barely faint hints of it. I can see it fairly well, but I'm sure that it's not coming up as well on camera. So now we're going to go into the next step. For this step, we're going to be doing flat washes. So for this particular part of our journey in rocks and crystal painting, I'm going to be using my number 6 round and my 1/2 inch wash brush. So just to get started, I'm going to take my clean water, and I'll show you how I do this. I'm getting the brush wet. So I want the brush wet, but not dripping. There's no dripping, but it's completely saturated. And now for the first one, we'll start with this one here and work across like that. So for this one, I'm going to do a rose quartz. So I'm going to first start out by just covering the entire area of the crystal with water. So at this stage, you just want your paper shiny, but not puddling. So I hope that you can see it's got a sheen to it, but it's not puddly. Now we're going to go ahead and switch on over to the smaller brush, and let's grab some color. Let me actually turn this around. Yeah, this is really pretty. I already have some white gouache on my palette. That was from an earlier project. So I have a fairly wet wash here. And now I'm going to just drop it into my very I'm going to drop it onto my paper here. And I'm just creating a loose wash. So don't worry so much about the inner lines right now. The main thing you want to be concerned with is the outline. Okay, so now that we have some nice color on there, very pretty, I'm going to drop a little bit more. Let's see, somewhere right here in the middle, just like so, and it'll just expand. Maybe I'll do another at the bottom here, like that. So that will just continue to kind of move around a little. And now I'm going to take just a little bit of salt. So first put it in your hand. Oop, I have the wrong end. So you don't want a whole lot. This is actually too much. I'm just going to take a pinch and I'm just going to drop it on the paper like that. And this is going to create some really cool effects. So now that you've seen how I've done the first one, I'm going to go ahead and do the rest in time lapse. Okay, this last one, I'm going to make it a moonstone. So in this case, I'm not going to use salt, and I'm going to do a different process a little bit. So I thought I would just run that through with you real time. So we do start off the same way with, let's just get that speck of dust out of there, with a nice even foundation of water. And now I'm going to drop in several colors. And again, I'm not worrying right now about precision. I'm just playing around with different colors. Let's put in some teal maybe. Moonstones have a lot of different colors, but they're all individually different. So here you can get really creative and have some fun with your particular moonstone. Let's see, how about this one? I don't know. I'm just going to flip the paper around just so it's a little easier for me on this side. Okay. So I don't want to over manipulate the paint. Let me drop a little bit more in. All right. So I'm not going to drop any salt onto that one either. All right, so we've got to let this dry completely. Go and do something else, come back, and then we'll get started on the next step. So this is how it turned out after it's dry. Now before we do anything else, we got to get the salt off the paper. So I'm just going to go ahead and with a dry brush, just abrade the page and get any salt crystals so you can see the salt crystals are now loose, so I'm going to go dump those. I'll be right back. Alright, so we have a fairly decent foundation to start our next step, which is the details. So for this step, even though we drew sort of a complex shape at the start, I like to let the way that the salt and all of the washes kind of formed inform my next step. So we may not follow the drawing precisely, but that's okay. It's all part of the creative process. So you can choose to follow it precisely or not. For this step, I'm going to be using a set of smaller rounds. So I have a number 6, a number 4, and a 0. You can see here, they're all just different sizes, same shape. So let's start with the rose quartz, and I'm going to zoom in just so that you can see what I'm doing a little better. This does mean you can't see my palette anymore. I'm very sorry about that, but I figure you probably want to see much more clearly what I'm up to. So I did create some lines here, and you can see the shape isn't precise. So the first thing I'm going to do is work on tightening up the outline. I'm actually going to grab my very smallest brush for this and get it wet. And I'm dipping right into the same color that I used before. And I'm just going to work on sharpening up this point here. And also that edge there, straightening it out so it's straight. I'm going to continue doing this all the way around. Now if I don't want it that dark, I just cleaned my brush. Now I'm just picking up some of the paint that's a little too dark with a thirsty brush. So first I dip it in the paint and then I squeeze any excess water out. And now I'll take this excess paint and follow along the line here. Like that. Okay, this line isn't too bad, so I'll leave it, but I definitely want to fix this side. So again, picking up a little bit of paint, I'm just going to touch up and straighten out. So it's nice you don't have to be precise. Precision is tricky with watercolor. So for the big flat washes, don't worry too much about precision. We're just trying to get a general shape and all that beautiful sort of crystal-y type interior. But then for precision, it's best to move to smaller brushes, in my opinion. It makes it easier. Let's grab a little more paint there. Like so. Now the bottom is a fairly ragged edge, so I'm not too worried about it being precise, but I do want to add some color to it. So now we're going to get into the detail. Now that we've sort of fixed up and straightened out the exterior, let's have some fun and play with shapes on the inside. Now there's no right or wrong way to do this. I'm just going to show you the way I'm doing it. So for this next step, I'm going to mix a couple other colors in, but you can choose whatever color crystals you want. Luckily there's lots of different color crystals out there. And by selectively darkening up just certain spots, we're going to make this look very three-dimensional. Let's see, where was the line here? See, now this beautiful like formation here is kind of telling me where I want to put my line. So I'm going to go away from the original sketch and follow what the watercolor is telling me to do. So you have to listen to your washes sometimes. I know that might sound crazy, but the watercolor will give you hints and help. So we're going to stop. Right there instead. Now I'm cleaning off my brush so it just has some clean water on it. I'm just going to moosh that. All right. Okay, so again, let's see here. We've got that one, this one. We need a facet down here, I think. So let's make one. So this is where literally going with the flow really does help. And now for this bottom edge that's really jaggy like that, I'm just going to put some squiggles down there. So now let's smooth out this line here so it blends into that facet. And you have to work fairly quickly to do this or it won't work quite that well. And now let's also do the same here. So let's, with some clean water, just blend out that line. I'm blending down. All right. So now let's actually touch up and finish up this spot here. And again with a clean brush. I'm just working it into the lighter areas. Now you notice I don't cover the whole area. I just do it until it's not looking like an outline anymore. Alright, so there you have it. This is how I'm going to leave this particular gemstone, or crystal rather, for the moment. I'm going to let this dry completely and then we're going to come back in again. So I'm going to move on to the other ones, and for the other ones I'm going to speed it up and do it in time lapse just to save you some time, but so that you can watch how I do each one. Okay, so for all of the crystals that you saw me do, I just used this little tiny brush. So you can use whatever you like, but I ended up not needing my larger brushes. Now we're going to move on into the moonstone. Again, I'll do this real time since it's the only one like it on the page. For this guy, I will swap over to my number 4. And I'll zoom in as well just so that you can see the details better. So the key with moonstone is that you do want, well, with all of these actually, is that you do want some bright spots and some dark spots. So for this particular guy, I'm going to work in a couple of different colors, mostly this light blue, and I'm just going to clean up the edge a little bit. So the key here is just to take your time, have some patience with it. Now with a somewhat dry brush, I'm going to work that line so that it's not harsh on the interior. So it looks a little softer. Now that we've got our edges cleaned up, let's have some fun with the color on the inside. So moonstones have lots of different colors. There's lots of different types of moonstones. So there's no right or wrong. But I'm going to go for the traditional classic looking one, the bluey, purpley, iridescent type. So I'm going to first work in some darks here at the bottom. Now I have a clean brush here and I'm just going to swipe that, kind of blend it in. Again, wiping off or cleaning my brush and then again blending it out. Okay, now I want to create some different, more stronger variation. So for this, let's see here, I think I'm using a fairly dry brush so that it doesn't go crazy on the page. I'm using a fairly dry brush here. Just the pigment doesn't run too much. And I kind of want those streaks, so that's why I'm doing that. Now I'm going to add in some more greens. Moonstones have lots of colors, so let's see, here's a green. Let's try this. Oh, that's too much water. There we go. Let's see here. Okay, and then cleaning off my brush, I'm going to just work that in again. Just that the lines aren't super harsh. Adding blue on this side. So this will be the darkest areas of the gemstone. Just blending out that line so it's not harsh. Dropped in a little bit of color into that. This really pale blue in the Kurotaki set is really nice for this. Alright, let's create some fire here in the middle. So I'm going to put some of that blue in, but this is a wet wash now. I'm now cleaning off my brush and only having it slightly damp. I'm going to move that around. Let's see, let's create some of that up here. Like that. And now I want to drop some color into that just to make it a little more varied. So I'm going to take some of my green. Well, we've gotten rid of the streaky bits, but that's okay. We can add it back later if we want to. I think it's turning out okay so far, so we'll just keep going. And let's see, let's add some more purple to it, not a lot. Let's see, what color do I want? And cleaning off my brush. Now I'm going to move that around. Alright, I'm going to do that again over here. So just put, this time with blue though. Put a little dab down. Then with a clean brush, we're going to smooth that out and blend it in. And I'm just building in layers until it starts to become three-dimensional. Let's see here. Now I'm stippling in a wet area. And so it's spreading, but it's still creating kind of a neat texture there. Now you notice I'm keeping some of the area fairly light, the original wash that we put down. That's because you need lights and darks, and I don't want to go too crazy. I'm mostly sticking to the edges of the gem where I know it will be darker, and just very judiciously working within this area. But I do want to create more color. So I'm going to grab that light blue that I like. I'm going to create a little area here. Now I have a clean brush. Just going to blend that in. Like that. And I think I'll do the same on the other side, but with that light green. So there's a nice light green in the Kuretake set. So I'm going to grab that, do that on the other side. And then with a clean brush, I'm going to blend that out into the middle. Alright, let me add a little more of a darker green to that, just at the bottom here. Cleaning my brush again, then we'll blend it out. Let's fix the shape. And now with a clean and pinched brush, so I pinched all the water off so it's dry. Let me just clean up this one spot here. So you can lift color, it's like erasing. Just to make that a little softer, let me actually do that down here too. Yeah. Alright, so I really like that blue color. I feel like it's a very moonstone-y color, so I'm gonna grab more of that, and let's put some, where do we want it? How about right in here? And I'll also put some of that, let's see, I'm gonna make some dots, and then clean my brush, and then clean my brush, and then just go over it so it kind of softens everything. I'm gonna soften this spot. Whoop. Kind of like that though. Let's blend that out up here. Happy accident. starting to come together. I'm going to let this dry. Oh, wait. Alright, starting to come together. I'm going to let this dry. I'll zoom out so you can see them all together. So here's our page so far. I'm going to let this dry and we're going to come in with a final layer of details and sparkly highlights. So, be right back. Okay, now that it's completely dry, there's no wet spots anywhere on the page, I want to go through and add a little bit more detail and also the sparkly bits. So this is the final step. The first thing I want to do is create some shadows. Right now they're sort of just hovering in space. We don't know where they're sitting. I want to ground them and make them feel more concrete. So to do that, I've decided that my light direction is coming from this way. Oh, you can hear my kitty. Abby girl. So I'm going to take some black, but I want to dilute it so it's gray. Oh, hello, my sweetheart. Okay, so now I want to put this right below. And wrap it around. And I'm going to put it on this side too. Like so. I'm going to move this puddle until it's even. And now I'm going to clean my brush. And then just along the edge, just soften and blur that out. Now with a thirsty brush, so I'm going to clean it and then pinch it so there's no water. Let me just pull up the outside so that there's not too much water here. And that's how I create a soft shadow. So we're going to do that for the other ones too. So here we're going to start here and just go right around. I'm going to do just a little bit up here as well. Let's do that up here, just so that they're all the same. And then with a clean, wet brush, we're just going to go around. That's pretty well blended. Let's just fix this spot here. And then with a thirsty brush, I'm going to just get rid of some of that excess water. Okay, so I'm going to repeat this process for each one, so I'll speed it up. Okay, so now that we've set all those shadows in place, let me just really quick just fix up some of the hard edges. So what I do is I just work these water lines with a thirsty, very slightly damp brush. Just sort of work that line until it's gone. Like so. Okay, so now I want to work a little bit of the color from each gem into the shadows, except for this one, which is fairly good right there. So just along the very edge, And again with a thirsty brush, just pulling up the very edge there. So I'm going to go through this for each color. So I'll skip this one, except maybe just to add a little bit of black, or gray rather, black mixed with water, right along the bottom there, just for a little extra depth. For this one here, let's switch to yellow. Add a little right in here, like so, and soften it out. Same with the purple. And soften it out. And for this one, I'm going to use that nice pale blue color. And adding shadows gives a lot of dimension and depth to it. Before, it felt like they were just sort of somewhere, but now we know that they're sitting on a flat surface and we're looking down at them. So, alright, so now I'd like to go through and just add details to each little guy. So I'm going to avoid the edges where I did the shadows for now until that's dry, and then we'll go through and do any of those areas if we need to. So for this, I'm going to swap over to my slightly smaller round brush. And I'm going to start with this one. And I'm just going to add any finishing touches that I see. So some of these lines to me feel a little too dark. So I'm just going to go, and I mix this with pink, the color red that we had, and the white gouache. So it's creating this nice opaque pink color. And I'm just gonna, oh abs, just to take away some of that harshness, because I think rose quartz, if I remember, it doesn't get that deep dark color that much. So again, I'm going to do that up here too. Now it looks more rosy and less ruby. And I want to add a little bit more color and variation. So I'm going to take that same color and just sort of add a little bit more in some spots. I like these lines, but I don't want them to be quite so dark. So I'm just touching a couple of the small spots that are just a little too dark for my taste, just to brighten them up a little bit, make them more rosy. Also just going to touch this here. So just these final finishing little details. Now, of course, I've muddied up my white gouache quite considerably over the course of this painting. So I'm going to dab a little bit more fresh stuff on my palette here on the edge, so that way I don't mix it in with anything else. And grabbing my teeny tiny little brush, I'm going to just dip into that. And let's add some bright highlights. So this, here, let me zoom in. So this is what will make it feel really sparkly. So I'm just going to choose a couple of key spots. And I'm using the gouache mostly purely undiluted. This will help create a nice solid highlight. If you have other materials like white ink or Posca pen, other things like that will work in this situation as well. And let's create a little bit down here. I just want to make these edges pop. Maybe actually I want to create a little bit more dimension there, so I'm going to go in with my slightly darker color and just it's maybe a little too dark. So there you have it. Now I'm going to go through and do all of the other ones in a similar way. Okay, so now we've cleaned up and fixed up some things. Actually, before I get to that, let me just put a little white gouache right there. There we go. Pardon me while I fuss. Alright, so now I'm going to work on the moonstone again, since, you know, it's the only one like it on the page. We're going to do that one again separate. So here we go. We don't need to do too much more to this, I think. I just want to bring up the contrast a little bit more. So I'm going to go in with some darks and lights and just solidify everything. I want to correct this one little spot that's bothering me. There we go. So now I'm going to go around the edge of the dark side, just add some deeper color. I think I'll add some dark blue. I like to add both. And contrast is what's going to bring it out even more, make it pop. So just having that little bit really does change a lot. And I think I'll also, let's see, where do I want it? Where do I want it? Do a little bit of blue. And I'm gonna gently fuzz that out. I don't want to work the page too much or I'll start to pull up what's under it. Just to give it a little more dimension there. And now I'm grabbing my white gouache. I want to add some shiny highlights to this one because it's more of a polished, like, smooth stone. So the first layer of gouache may not be enough. You can see it's not white really, too dull. So let's add some more right in the center. I may even add, let's even add some more to that. Couple little shiny dots, why not? And I'm also going to add a little bit right there, but it has too much water on it. Let's pull out all the water. And that just gives it a really shiny look. Another thing I want to do is just deepen up a little bit right here in the center. So I'm going to grab that green, add a little bit more saturation. And also that blue that I like. Let's just add a little bit more here. Now again, this is all up to your discretion. Maybe I want to add a little bit more purple. Let's dilute that though so it's not so strong. Add it right there. Too much water though. Hold on, let me pull that out with a thirsty brush. Let me actually grab a different one that's already more dry. There we go, that's better. Don't want it too dark. Yeah, all right. Maybe a little bit more right in the center here. Kind of curve that shape a little more. So this is all about just refining what you have. You may not follow me exactly, but I'm just showing you how I'm doing it. Okay, see that white gouache already dried too light. I think I had too much water in it, so I'm going to add some more to my palette. The trick with this stuff is it really needs to be completely undiluted to have full strength. So no water, just straight from the tube, best way. There we are, that's better. All right. And actually, let me do that to this line here that I added. Still a little too dull. So you may end up needing a couple layers of the white gouache in some spots. Everywhere else seemed like it worked out okay. So now the last final step, This is optional, but I thought it would be fun. I have this pearlescent shimmer paint from Daniel Smith. It's a beautiful paint. I'm going to use this judiciously throughout the piece. So I'm just going to add a very small bit. All right. I'm going to grab my slightly larger brush. I'll start over here with the pink. And I don't want a whole lot. I'm not going to put it all over, but I'm going to put it in the areas that would be catching the light. And it doesn't look like much, but when it dries it will be sparkly, but it's a subtle, it's a shimmer. It's not like a full-on glitter. But I think considering the subject matter, this would be really nice. So I'm going to do that in a couple different facets. And if you need to, you can kind of tilt the paper until you can see it better. So you can see what I'm up to here. It's just like a little shimmer. Doesn't pick it up on camera very well, but in person I think it's a nice, beautiful, subtle touch that will add a lot to it. So again, if you're not sure, you can just check your page by tilting it a little. And what's nice about this color is it's very transparent. So the colors that are underneath will show through, but it will also give you that nice sparkly look. So I'm going to put it in the highlights here. Now the key is to not fuss too much, otherwise you'll pull up the color underneath. So you can see it's just a little shiny. Nothing too dramatic. Let me put a little more right here. Yeah. So I'm going to do this now for each one. Okay, so I need a little more than I thought. Let me add a little more to my palette. And this color is so much fun. So shiny. I feel like it's a nice touch, but you don't need to do this, or you could use a different thing if you'd like. Let me add a little more to this here. Okay, and then to the moonstone, I'm going to add more to the moonstone than the others because of its like pearlescent, like opal-y kind of nature. I'm going to add it right along the area where the highlights would be. Alright, I think that'll do. Let's add a little bit more right there. Okay. So, there you have it. We've got some gemstones now done with watercolor. You could go on and take some other medium to this if you want, or just leave it as it is. But either way, I hope this helped you out. I hope that you enjoyed this little project with me. And yeah, if you liked this and you want to see more, please hit that subscribe button. I'll be doing more watercolor tutorials in the future. And if you liked this video in particular, hit that like button. It helps me out so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful time painting. Bye.